Hi everyone, welcome to Live Interactive English. I'm Mike.
I'm Rainbow.
And I need land.
You need more land?
I need more land. I need
what would
so
you
much
do with
land.
it?
I have no idea. I'd build a really big garage for all my cars.
And then?
Buy cars. Because I have no cars. I would build a beautiful hotel.
Okay. I want an organic farm.
An organic farm. That's a great idea. That's a much better idea than my stupid ideas. What would you grow on your organic farm?
I would grow all the fruits and vegetables.
Now, wait a minute. Are you going to be out there on your hands and knees in the dirt and the sun, taking care of your apple trees and cherry trees? I can't really see Farmer Rainbow.
I want to do like build a house where people can live there and then they can farm and then they can live there.
So you would be a landowner.
Yeah.
You would be the lady and they would be the peasants.
But anybody from the world could come.
Oh, that's nice.
And stay here.
Oh, that's a very
farm.
nice. You could have like the Olympics of farming.
Yeah.
All these different farmers from all around the world.
Yeah.
Growing things on your land.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I think I'll be your neighbor.
Oh, that would be fun.
Look over there. You see the giant empty garage with no cars in it? That's me. I'm your neighbor. So there you go. How much land does a man need? Well, if it's a woman with a good idea, a lot of land. If it's a man with a terrible idea, I don't know. I don't need. Take the land away. I'll just do
Sell it.
I'll do something stupid with it. All right, let's find out about Pahom then. He's the guy with the real problems with land.
Following a tip given to him by a merchant, Pahom seeks out the Bashkirs, a nomadic group who are willing to sell their land for almost nothing. He and his servant meet the Bashkir chief, who tells him that for only 1,000 rubles, Pahom can claim all the land that he desires, so long as he meets certain conditions. The chief explains to Pahom that he needs to section the land off by foot, mark his spots with a spade, and return before nightfall. Pahom agrees and plans to set out in the morning. That night, Pahom has a nightmare in which the merchant and Bashkir chief have each turned into the devil, with Pahom lying dead at their feet. In the morning, Pahom begins marking his land.
All right, so yeah, part 2 of how much land does a man need? Pahom was feeling pretty good about his life when we left him at the end of part 1, wasn't he? Things were going well for him.
But I think he's about to get more land.
That's right, the devil was making him greedy, wasn't the devil? Yeah, it's not nice.
Yep. So today's article starts out, following a tip given to him by a merchant, Pahom seeks out the Bashkirs, a nomadic group who are willing to sell their land for almost nothing. So these are people who want to give him their land for very little money. And of course, Pahom being really greedy, he wants the land.
That's right. This was a hot tip. This is a little bit of advice, a little bit of gossip or news he learned from someone. And I guess these Bashkir people, this might be sort of like a tribe or a group or something, and maybe they travel.
Nomads.
Yeah, maybe they're nomads, people who don't stay on their land. They travel around with their cattle or sheep, so they don't need a lot of land, and they decided to get rid of it at a very good low price. So, of course, Pahom is super interested. Next we read, he, that's Pahom, and his servant, yeah, he's got enough money for servants now. So Pahom, he and his servant meet the Bashkir chief, who tells him that for only 1,000 rubles, Pahom can claim all the land that he desires, so long as he meets certain conditions.
Ooh.
That's a little interesting. So
there are rules.
There's
to
rules,
the game.
but there's land, this deal.
It's real cheap.
It's really cheap. Yeah, he can have all the land that he wants for 1,000 rubles. This is a form of money that they use in Russia and sort of that part of Central Asia. And so, Pahom's thinking, wow, this is such a low price. I want this land, even if there are certain conditions. This is kind of like a rule, So the guy would say, I'll sell you the land, but
You have to do this.
You can only build farms on it. You can't build houses on it or something like that.
All right, the next sentence. The chief explains to Pahom that he needs to section the land off by foot, mark his spots with a spade, and return before nightfall. Pahom agrees and plans to set out in the morning. So there are some conditions, rules we have to follow that requires a spade. What is a spade?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think these would be the conditions, but he has to measure out the land by foot, so actually walk the land to see the size of it. And then when he picks the size of land, he has to maybe mark the edges or the corners by using a spade. Now, a spade is something you would use if you're working in the garden, if you're digging a hole.
Okay.
A spade and a shovel are very similar. A shovel might have more like a spoon thing to actually lift the dirt and make it into a big pile. The spade is what you use at the beginning to just cut into the earth.
Oh.
So it might not have that kind of scoop. It might just be more like a blade that you use to cut and to turn the earth. So you'd use a spade to begin the hole. You'd use a spade to maybe make little holes to put seeds in if you're planting seeds. But it's basically a gardening tool, kind of like a shovel for cutting, digging, and lifting earth. For example, Jim dug a wide hole with a spade and planted some roses. So it sounds like he's laying out a flower bed using his spade. All right, so that night, Pahom has a nightmare in which the merchant and Bashkir chief have each turned into the devil.
Oh my goodness.
With Pahom lying dead at their feet.
He got killed?
Oh my gosh, this is a nightmare, remember? This is a bad dream he has, and so it's almost like his mind is trying to tell him all of this love of land, this is going to lead you to bad places like the devil's doing it to you. We know the devil hurt him. He didn't know that, but now he's kind of had a warning. You might think he would wake up and go, I'm not buying this land. This is a terrible idea. Something bad's going to happen.
He's greedy.
I had this dream. I really got to do something. I'm afraid now. Well, that's not what happened. He woke up and maybe he just thought, it's a dream, but I got to go buy land today. And that's what he went off and did. Forget about the warning and the nightmare. In the morning, it says, Pahom begins marking his land. So he's going to buy the land and he's going to, ignore that nightmare.
So last night he had a nightmare. A nightmare is something that scares you in the nighttime. So that's why it starts with the word night. It's a dream you have at night that makes you wake up and you're probably crying or sweating because it was a horrible dream. Maybe somebody was chasing you, maybe you died or something, or maybe the devil was in it. So nightmares are bad dreams that we don't want to have. Last night I had a terrible nightmare about giant spiders taking over the earth. Oh, that is really scary actually.
Cool.
I would not want to have. I mean, if you like spiders, it's cool. Okay, let's take a really quick break and we're going to continue to see the story and the fate of Pahom.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Hanny。我们继续来读 How much land does a man need 这个故事哦。帕红跟他的家人虽然已经体验到美好生活，但这对他来说还不够。根据一名商人给的内幕消息，帕红找到了巴什基尔人 The Bashkirs。那他们是一个游牧民族，愿意用非常低的价钱来出售土地。文中用到 nomadic 是形容游牧的、游牧部落的。那老师们有提到 nomads， 我们来补充一下 nomad nomad 表示游牧民，就是游牧民族的一员，或者是指这个流浪者的意思。那么故事写到说，帕红跟他的仆人有见到了巴什基尔人的这个酋长，酋长说啊，只要1000卢布，帕红就可以把所有他想要的土地收为己有。可是这有条件哦，就是帕红他必须徒步划定土地界限，用铲子来标记他所到的地点，然后要在黄昏之前回来。好，那么帕红就同意了，计划要隔天一早出发。那天晚上他做一个噩梦，梦到啊那一名商人还有巴什基尔人酋长都各自变成魔王，然后帕红就死在他们脚下。这听起来根本就是个预言梦的感觉啊！可是他并不担心，他隔天早上就开始标记土地了。好，来看单字 spade。 Spade 它表示铲子。Mike 老师说的 shovel S-H-O-V-E-L shovel 也是铲子，不过 spade 它的形状会比较像刀片。这时候老师说的 blade B-L-A-D-E blade 表示刀片，它也可以用来指可能像是风扇等等的那种叶片。下一个单字 nightmare 表示噩梦。好，这边一个重点，我们进入文法时间。好，我们来看这个重点是 with 加受词加受词补语，是用来表达附带状况或者是原因。那受词补语你可以用形容词、现在分词 VING 或是过去分词 PP 等等。如果我们用分词当受词补语的话，就去看这个受词跟受词补语的关系。如果是主动关系，就用现在分词 VING； 被动就用过去分词 PP。我们来看3个例句。第一个例句是It's bad manners to talk with your mouth full. 满嘴食物还说话是不礼貌的哦。那这边受词补语我们用到 full 这个形容词。Helen waited in the car with the music playing. Helen 在车内等待，音乐正播放着。那受词补语用到 playing， 现在分词 VING 来描述这个音乐在播放的状态。再来 with our bags packed.We're ready to hit the road. 我们的包包打包好，准备好要出发咯。那 hit the road 不是真的要拿拳头去揍路面、揍这个马路哦，而是指那种出发启程的意思。那这边我们用到过去分词 packed 来当它的受词补语，表达包包被打包好的状态。好，那接回到课文中。
With the sun beating down on him, Pahom marks as much land as he can with his spade, eventually covering several miles. Exhausted, Pahom sprints back to his starting point as the sun sets. When he finally arrives, he collapses dead on the ground below the Bashkir chief. Pahom's servant digs a hole and buries him in it. It turns out 6 feet from his head to his heels was all he needed.
So just before he made this big land deal, Pahom had a nightmare where the devil was trying to sell him land. You think that will stop him? No, he's greedy. He wants this land. So we read, with the sun beating down on him, Pahom marks as much land as he can with his spade, eventually covering several miles of land. So yeah, he's still greedy. He's out there on a hot day. The sun beating down on him means it's a really hot day. And he's out there walking the land, marking it, and picking his huge area, his many, many miles of land. And of course, this is a long, hard day of work. So it says, exhausted, Pahom sprints back to his starting point as the sun sets. He has to be back at the beginning to get the land, but he's been working really hard in the hot sun. He's exhausted.
So Pahom is exhausted, and what exhausted means is really, really tired. Not just a little bit tired, but like, we're gonna pass out kind of tired because you're so tired you're just gonna fall down. All right, so after finishing the 10-kilometer race, Omar was totally exhausted because he'd been running for a very long time. So has Pahom. When he finally arrives, he collapses dead on the ground below the Bashkir chief. Pahom's servant digs a hole and buries him in it. It turns out 6 feet from his head to his heels was all he needed.
Wow.
What does that mean? 6 feet from his head to his heels. That means when you're dead, you only need enough land to put your body in it. I guess Pahom was 6 feet, so that's all that he needed. He did not need that much land, and he died, and then he only just needed the land he was buried in. That's a really sad story.
Well, there you go. It's a lesson that your greed can be the end for you. It can bring you to a very terrible death. In this case, he didn't get all that land and he'd become the rich guy. He got just enough land for a dead guy because he collapsed after working in the hot sun all day. Well, sure, yeah. I mean, in a hot Taiwanese summer, if you're out there and you work all day and you don't take a break, don't wear a hat, don't drink water, you could get in serious physical trouble. And sometimes when your body is sick, when things are really wrong with you, you will collapse. Basically, that's to fall down, just to fall down. He didn't just sort of go, oh, I think I'm getting a little tired. No, he just fell down. A person would collapse if they had a heart attack, if they got hit on the head, something like that. A building would collapse in an earthquake if it was very powerful. The building will just fall down all of a sudden out of nowhere, and it's probably not getting up anytime soon. For example, my neighbor collapsed on the street and had to be taken to the hospital. Well, yeah, if you see anyone collapse out on the street, the first thing you should probably do is call for an ambulance and then run over and see if they need help, because something's wrong. All right, so what do you think? This is a very interesting story. Let's see the question we have for our what do you think question. What should Pahom have done differently? Why?
I think Pahom should have stopped buying land when his life was good.
Yes.
Because he already had everything he needed and everyone around him was happy. Yeah. So if he was happy, then he wouldn't have died in the end.
Absolutely, yeah. He was being warned by the devil. The devil was doing all these things to make him greedy. If he could only just controlled his greed, he wouldn't have had any of these problems. And you're right, he probably would have been happy and definitely
and not dead.
Would have been alive. There you go. So a lesson in being greedy. It might lead you to a very unfortunate end. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. We hope you continue, though, to be greedy for English knowledge, because we'll be here to help you guys out with that. With more fun, fascinating, and interesting articles, we'll see you soon. Until then, bye-bye.
刚刚说到帕红早上就开始标记土地，那在大太阳底下，他用铲子尽可能多标记土地，最后走了好几英里。那么精疲力尽的帕红在太阳下山时跑回出发点，可是当他终于抵达的时候，却倒在这个酋长脚下的地上，一命呜呼。帕红的仆人就挖了一个洞把他埋起来，结果从头到脚，他其实只需要6英尺的土地，再多土地他也用不到了。好，单字 exhausted， 它是形容精疲力尽的，非常疲惫的。那它的名词是 exhaustion 表示精疲力尽或是疲惫不堪。好，再来看 collapse 这个动词可以表达突然的倒下、昏倒，它也有崩溃的意思。那这边2个重点，我们进入文法时间。好，我们来看第一个重点是 as one can， 表示尽可能的怎么样，尽可能多的怎么样，或是尽量怎么样，就跟 as as possible 意思相近。以下就介绍相关句型。好，我们在 as as 之间呢，去加入形容词或副词的话，我们来看看例句。I try to keep my room as clean as I can， 也可以改写成 I try to keep my room as clean as possible。我试着尽可能让房间保持干净。好，再来我们看到 as as 之间，你还可以加入 many 复数可数名词，或者是加入 much 不可数名词。举例来说 ，Tim wants to make as much money as possible。Tim 想要尽量多赚钱。His dream is to travel around the world and visit as many countries as he can。他的梦想是环游世界，尽可能多去一些国家。第二个重点是 turn out， 它表示结果是怎么样，最后发现怎么样，或是原来是……可以用来指出某事的发展或结果出乎意料。那常常会用在 it 当作虚主词的句型当中，把它写作 It turns out that……那真正的主词是 that 子句，这个 that 可以省略哦。例如It turns out that they have been dating for 5 months。原来他们已经交往5个月嘞。好，那么以上的讲解，同学别走开，马上回来哦。
Following a tip given to him by a merchant, Pahom seeks out the Bashkirs, a nomadic group who are willing to sell their land for almost nothing. He and a servant meet the Bashkir chief, who tells him that for only 1,000 rubles, Pahom can claim all the land that he desires, so long as he meets certain conditions. The chief explains to Pahom that he needs to section the land off by foot, mark his spots with a spade, and return before nightfall. Pahom agrees and plans to set out in the morning. That night, Pahom has a nightmare in which the merchant and Bashkir chief have each turned into the devil, with Pahom lying dead at their feet. In the morning, Pahom begins marking his land. With the sun beating down on him, Pahom marks as much land as he can with his spade, eventually covering several miles. Exhausted, Pahom sprints back to his starting point as the sun sets. When he finally arrives, he collapses dead on the ground below the Bashkir chief. Pahom's servant digs a hole and buries him in it. It turns out 6 feet from his head to his heels was all he needed.
Good day, everybody. I am Shane.
And I'm Jamie.
Today we are playing Word Drop. We each have 3 cards that have 3 words on them, but we have no idea what they are. So we're going to look at the cards and try to work these words into a conversation as naturally as possible. So why don't you begin?
Okay, all right. All right, ready?
Yes.
Let's start. Well, okay.
Okay.
So have you ever gone to a buffet before? I think most of us have been to them. They're pretty fun because they have so much food, right? There's
Yes.
lots and lots of dishes. And I think one thing I used to think about is, what if the table had so much food that the table that the table collapsed?
Oh, like
Yeah,
it's
I was worried the table would collapse.
Right, I guess at a buffet, sometimes you do eat so much food that the table just collapses, right? Yeah, I remember once I was at a restaurant and there was my friend and I were having a few drinks, having some fun, and we decided to get up on the table and we were dancing and the table did collapse. It was a complete nightmare. I broke my leg.
Oh, ouch. That sounds awful.
Yeah, nightmare.
Wow. Well, you know what's awesome about buffets, though, is that the food is usually really delicious. And what's even more delicious is food that's grown like in a garden by yourself, right? Like growing your own food, organic food is really delicious. And if you've ever planted stuff before, you know you need to use some tools like a watering can and perhaps a spade.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, using a spade kind of as a gardening tool. You could also use that as a kind of a weapon, right?
You could.
Yeah, I mean, if someone was coming at you and you're having a fight, right? I mean, once I was having a sword fight with somebody, just plastic swords, and we were running around the yard, and the person was chasing me around with this sword. He picked up a rake. I was scared to death. After this game, I was completely exhausted.
Oh, wow. That sounds very exhausting.
I was exhausted just telling the story.
Wow. Well, that reminds me, when you go to buffets, back to the topic of buffets,
we like
right?
buffets,
We really like buffets. So I think families like to go there, though, because it's so cost effective, right? You can eat a lot of food for a little amount of money. And I think families want to save as much money as they can.
That's true, yes.
Like,
I mean,
people want to save as much money as one can.
Right, it's definitely a good way to save money going to buffets. And actually, in America, a lot of buffets are starting to close down. Because I mean, think in a place like Taiwan, people aren't going to eat too much when they go there. But in America, people will not stop eating. They will stay for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It turns out that you cannot have a buffet in America and make money. You will lose money.
Oh,
That's what it turns out to be.
wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
See you next time.